Little Billy came home from school to see the family's pet rooster dead in the front yard. Rigor mortis had set in, and it lay flat on its back, legs in the air. When his dad came home, Billy said, "Dad, our rooster is dead, and his legs are sticking in the air. Why are his legs sticking in the air?" His father, thinking quickly, said, "Son, that's so God can reach down from the clouds and lift the rooster straight up to heaven." "Gee, Dad, that's great," said little Billy. A few days later, when Dad came home from work, Billy rushed out to meet him, yelling, "Dad, Dad, we almost lost Mom today." "What do you mean?" asked Dad. "Well, Dad, I got home from school early today and went up to your bedroom, and there was Mom flat on her back with her legs in the air screaming, 'Jesus, I'm coming, I'm coming!' If it hadn't been for Uncle George holding her down, we'd have lost her for sure." When 6-year-old Johnny and his mom are waiting at the bus stop, she says to him, "I'll get a ticket for myself, and if the driver asks how old you are, tell him you are 5, then I won't have to pay." The bus pulls up, they get on, and Mom pays for an adult return to the town center. The driver then asks the boy, "And what is your name, young man?" He proudly replies, "I'm Johnny." The driver inquires, "And how old are you, Johnny?" "I'm only 5 years old." The driver asks further, "And when will you be 6?" Johnny replied, "As soon as I get off the bus." Little Johnny was sitting in class doing math problems when his teacher picked him to answer a question. "Johnny, if 5 birds were sitting on a fence and you shot one with your gun, how many would be left?" "None," replied Johnny, "'cause the rest would fly away." "Well, the answer is 4, said the teacher, "but I like the way you're thinking." Little Johnny is annoyed and says, "I have a question for you. If there were 3 women eating ice cream cones in a shop, one was licking her cone, the second was biting her cone, and the third was sucking her cone, which one is married?" "Well," said the teacher nervously, "I guess the one sucking the cone." "No," said little Johnny, "the one with the wedding ring on her finger, but I like the way you're thinking." A boss in Johnny's office came out and said, "Little Johnny, come to my office right now." Little Johnny said, "Yes, sir." Little Johnny enters the boss's office, and the boss says, "I saw you arguing with the customer who just left. I have told you before that the customer is always right. Do you understand me?" Little Johnny said, "Yes, sir, the customer is always right." "So, what were you arguing about with that customer?" asked the boss. "He said my boss is stupid and an idiot, sir." The boss was fuming and said, "That bastard, what did you say to him?" Little Johnny replied with a smile, "I told him he's right, sir." A stranger was seated next to little Johnny on the plane when he turned to Johnny and said, "Let's talk. I've heard that flights will go quicker if you strike up a conversation with your fellow passenger." Little Johnny, who had just opened his book, closed it slowly and said to the stranger, "What would you like to discuss?" "Oh, I don't know," said the stranger. "How about nuclear power?" "Okay," said little Johnny. "That could be an interesting topic. But let me ask you a question first. A horse, a cow, and a deer all eat grass. The same stuff. Yet a deer excretes little pellets, while a cow turns out a flat patty, and a horse produces clumps of dried grass. Why do you suppose that is?" "Geez," said the stranger. "I have no idea." "Well then," said little Johnny, "how is it that you feel qualified to discuss nuclear power when you don't know shit?" Little Johnny had just passed his driving test and inquired of his father as to when they could discuss his use of the car. His father said he'd make a deal with his son. "You bring your grades up from a C to a B average, study your Bible a little, and get your hair cut. Then we'll talk about the car." Little Johnny thought about that for a moment, decided he'd settle for the offer, and they agreed on it. After about 6 weeks, his father said, "Son, you've brought your grades up, and I've observed that you have been studying your Bible, but I'm disappointed you haven't had your hair cut." Little Johnny said, "You know, Dad, I've been thinking about that, and I've noticed in my studies of the Bible that Samson had long hair, John the Baptist had long hair, Moses had long hair, and there's even strong evidence that Jesus had long hair." The dad asked, "Did you also notice they all walked everywhere they went?" Little Johnny's chemistry teacher wanted to teach his class a lesson about the evils of liquor, so he set up an experiment that involved a glass of water, a glass of whiskey, and 2 worms. "Now, class, observe what happens to the 2 worms," said the professor, putting the first worm in the glass of water. The worm in the water moved about, twisting and seemingly unharmed. He then dropped the second worm in the whiskey glass. It writhed in pain for a moment, then quickly sank to the bottom and died. "Now, kids, what lesson can we derive from this experiment?" he asked. Little Johnny raised his hand and wisely responded, "Drink whiskey, and you won't get worms." One day, during a lesson on proper grammar, the teacher asked for a show of hands for who could use the word beautiful in the same sentence twice. First, she called on little Susie, who responded with, "My father bought my mother a beautiful dress, and she looked beautiful in it." "Very good, Susie," replied the teacher. She then called on little Michael. "My mommy planned a beautiful banquet, and it turned out beautifully," Michael said. "Excellent, Michael." Then, the teacher called on little Johnny. Little Johnny said, "Last night at the dinner table, my sister told my father that she was pregnant, and he said, 'Beautiful, fucking beautiful.'" Little Johnny was in church with his mom for Sunday Mass when he suddenly felt nauseous. "Mom, I think I'm going to throw up." She told him, "I want you to run outside as fast as you can. Run across the lawn and go behind the bushes. You can throw up behind the bushes and nobody will see you." So, little Johnny hauled ass for the door. Less than a minute later, he returned to his seat next to his mom. He had the look of obvious relief on his young face. His mom asked, "Did you make it all the way to the bushes, Johnny?" Johnny replied, "I didn't have to go that far, Mom. Just as I got to the front door, I found a box that had a sign on it, 'For the sick.'" Little Johnny was only 6 years old when he tried to feel his sister's friend's pussy. She slapped him and said not to because it has teeth and will bite. As the years passed and little Johnny one day grew to become a man, he was sitting in his car with his girlfriend, rubbing her thighs and squeezing her tits, when she asked, "Aren't you going to feel my pussy?" He said, "I can't. It's got teeth." "Don't be a fool," she said. "Have a look if you don't believe me." So he thought about it, then took off her panties and spread her legs. He looked in and said, "I'm not surprised you haven't got any teeth with gums like that." Little Johnny is in class one day, and little Timmy starts laughing. The teacher asks, "What's so funny?" He said, "I can see your bra strap." The teacher said, "Don't come back to class for a week," so he got up and walked out. A few minutes later, little Billy starts laughing, and she asks, "What's funny now?" Little Billy said, "I can see both of your bra straps." The teacher says, "Get out of my classroom for a month." So little Billy got pissed that he walked out and slammed the door. This scared the teacher, and she dropped the chalk. She picked it up, and when she stood back up, she saw little Johnny walking out of the classroom. She asked him, "Where do you think you're going?" He said, "Well, teacher, after what I saw, I'm done with school for a lifetime."